6 years ago, to keep from dragging down my boyfriend while he was building his startup, I cruelly told him I had fallen in love with someone else. He was completely heartbroken by me, went overseas, and never came back. 6 years later, he returned home with his fiancée to get married. And I had also received the death sentence from the hospital. Late-stage ovarian cancer, malignant ascites, and even a loose oversized hoodie could not hide my painfully swollen belly. When my ex-boyfriend saw me, his gaze fell on my stomach, and he let out a scoff. So you really were in love with someone else back then? Which pregnancy is this for you now? He looked around, and there was only me sitting alone in a wheelchair. What, he knocked you up but would not even marry you? I lowered my head and gently touched my swollen belly. Inside it was only more than 10 pounds of malignant ascites that could never be fully drained. It was not a child. I smiled bitterly and lied. I am almost due. He is busy with work and does not have time to come with me. He did not know that I was dying. He also did not know that we really did once have a child. The last trace of complexity in his eyes turned completely into mockery. Lily, you really have not changed at all. For money you will go with any man. You abandoned me back then, and now you have ended up like this. You deserve it. The fiancé beside him gently held his arm and advised him in a low voice. Forget it. It is all in the past. But he gave a cold laugh. The past? I will never forget how she looked down on me for being poor back then, and turned around to get into another man's car. I did not explain, because the car he was talking about was an ambulance. That day, I had just gotten my test results, and the doctor told me there was a malignant tumor on my ovary, and that I had to be hospitalized immediately. And he was running everywhere, begging people for help for a multi-million-dollar project. I did not dare tell him. Back then, he could not even take $3,000 out of his bank account. Yet he stayed up until dawn every day, just so he could save enough for a down payment sooner and marry me. I was afraid he would give up on his startup, afraid he would sell his company, afraid he would ruin his whole life to save me. So I deliberately held my attending doctor's arm and said to him, I have fallen in love with someone else. With red eyes, he slammed his fist into the wall. Lily, you are going to regret this. Later, he really left. He went abroad and became the rising business star everyone talked about. And I stayed alone in the hospital, going through surgery, chemotherapy, relapse, and chemotherapy again. Until today. The doctor told me there was no point in continuing treatment anymore. He told me to go home, eat whatever I wanted, and meet whoever I wanted to see. But the only person I wanted to see was standing right in front of me. Yet he would never believe me again. After returning to the hospital room, I lay down on the bed with the help of my attending doctor. Ethan's mother came to find me. As soon as she entered, she looked at me tentatively, hesitant to speak. Lily, I have a favor to ask. Looking at her flushed face, even though she did not say what came next, I knew her reason for coming was probably the same as it had been 6 years ago. Go ahead. Her eyes instantly turned red. Ethan has really suffered so much these years. After you left back then, he did not recover for 2 whole years. Later, he went overseas alone, worked during the day, built his business at night, and collapsed from exhaustion so many times that he ended up in the hospital, but he never said a word to us. Now, it was not easy for him to finally have a stable career, and he has also met someone willing to stay with him. He is about to get married. As she spoke, tears fell. Lily, just take it as me begging you. Do not go looking for him again, and do not tell him about your illness. Just let him think that you have been living well all these years. That way, it is better for you and for him. I listened quietly without speaking, but the attending doctor could not help frowning. Ma'am, this is not fair. I gently shook my head, signaling for him not to speak. But Ethan's mother seemed to have caught on to something, and her eyes swept back and forth between me and the attending doctor. She suddenly lowered her voice and muttered softly, He protects her so much. Who knows if the two of you have been together for a long time. Now this male doctor stays with her every day. Who knows what kind of relationship they have. The hospital room instantly fell silent. The attending doctor's face darkened at once. Please show some respect when you speak. Ms. Bennett is my patient. Taking care of her is my duty as a doctor. And as for why she became like this today, others may not know, but you. Enough. Using all my strength, I reached out with my hand that was so thin only bones were left and gently pulled the attending doctor's sleeve. He lowered his head to look at me, his eyes already red with anger. I gently shook my head at him. I slowly turned my head and looked at Ethan's mother. I could clearly see the guardedness in her eyes, the caution, and that tiny bit of fear that her son might be entangled with me again. So that was how it was. Even though I was already about to die, in her eyes, I was still the person who would ruin her son's life. I held back the ache in my eyes and gave a soft smile. I will not go looking for him. And I will not tell him about my illness. From now on, I will try my best not to appear in front of him again. Let him get married in peace and live his life in peace. Just pretend. My voice was so soft it could barely be heard. Just pretend we never knew each other. Anyway, I am dying soon. After seeing Ethan's mother off, I felt as if all the strength had been drained out of my body. The nurse adjusted my four, and the attending doctor gave me another painkiller shot. Soon, I fell into a heavy, hazy sleep. I did not know how long I had slept when a familiar voice suddenly came from outside the hospital room. Is Lily hospitalized because she is about to give birth? My eyes snapped open, and my breath caught slightly. It was Ethan. I stared blankly at the ceiling, and for a moment, I thought I was dreaming. 6 years ago, he hated me to the bone. On the day we broke up, he knelt in front of me, his eyes red, begging me again and again. Lily, tell me, did I do something wrong? I will change. I will change anything. I bit my lip hard and did not dare look into his eyes. At that time, fluid had already begun collecting in my abdomen, and my lower belly had started to bulge slightly. I lowered my head, touched my stomach, hardened my heart, and said to him, I am already pregnant with another man's child. He stared blankly at my stomach, and the color drained from his face little by little. After a long time, he finally asked in a hoarse voice, when did it happen? I forced myself to lift the corners of my mouth. I got together with him not long after I met him. He has more money than you, more ability than you, and a better future than you. Ethan, I never planned to suffer with you. Every word was like a knife stabbing into my heart. After he heard it, he turned and left. I watched his back, and my tears would not stop falling. From then on, he treated me as the person he hated most. Whenever someone mentioned my name in front of him, he would cut them off with a cold face. Do not mention her. Just hearing her name makes me sick. Later, on the day he went abroad, I still secretly went to the airport. Through the crowd he saw me, but right in front of me, he only smashed the couple rings we had bought together, and the phone full of our photos hard onto the ground, then turned and boarded the plane without looking back again. I had always thought that in this lifetime, he would never take the initiative to see me again. But I never expected that he would actually come to the hospital with his fiancée Susie. Susie was already 3 months pregnant, so he had brought her here for a prenatal checkup. Her gaze landed on my high, swollen abdomen, and her eyes lit up as she smiled and walked a few steps closer. Ms. Bennett, are you here to wait for delivery too? I instinctively tugged down my hospital gown, wanting to cover my swollen abdomen. Before I could speak, Susie gently stroked her own belly and smiled with a face full of happiness. This is my first pregnancy, so I do not understand anything. I heard from Ethan that you have given birth to quite a few children over the past 6 years. You must have a lot of experience, right? I clenched the corner of the blanket tightly, and my knuckles slowly turned pale. Ethan stood to the side, his indifferent gaze falling on my stomach as a mocking curve lifted at the corner of his mouth. Exactly. Since you have so much experience, teach Susie. After all, she is not like certain people who can casually get pregnant with another man's child. Susie seemed not to notice the atmosphere and still looked completely serious. Ms. Bennett, is late pregnancy especially hard? Do you sleep badly at night? And giving birth, does it really hurt? By the way, where is your husband? She looked around, and besides the doctor and nurse, there was no one else in the room. A trace of surprise flashed in her eyes. Why is he not here with you? Ethan scoffed. What other reason could there be? Of course he does not want her anymore. For someone like her, it is already lucky if anyone is willing to take responsibility once. I slowly lowered my head. My hand gently covered my high, swollen belly. My eyes turned red little by little. There had once really been a child living there. That was the last piece of good news the doctor told me before chemotherapy. He said I was pregnant. It was also bad news. The tumor had spread too quickly, and the baby was developing slowly. Everyone told me to terminate the pregnancy immediately, but I held my belly and wanted to keep the child. Unfortunately, in the end my child with him was still lost because of my illness. The baby became a pool of blood. I cried so hard I could not say a complete sentence. I lost him. And I also lost the chance to ever become a mother. And now, what was swollen high in my abdomen was not a child. It was only more than 10 pounds of malignant ascites that could never be fully drained. But I could not say a single word of this. I raised my head and forced out a smile. Pregnancy is indeed very hard. I hope your child can be born safely and smoothly. At that moment, my best friend Zoe came in carrying fruit, and when she saw Ethan and Susie, her face changed. Her lips and teeth trembled several times before she roared one sentence at Ethan. Fuck you. You and your mother are both shameless as hell. Do you even know that Lily she? Hearing her choked voice, my heart tightened sharply, and I propped myself up to sit. Zoe, I will tell them myself. Zoe looked at me with red eyes, her lips trembling, but in the end, she still lowered her head, gritted her teeth hard, and swallowed all her words back down. I slowly raised my head and looked at Ethan. We had not seen each other in 6 years, and he had become much more mature than before. The young man who once stayed up until his eyes were bloodshot for a project now wore a crisp suit, his brows and eyes cold, and every gesture carried the calm confidence of a successful man. That was good. He had finally become the person he wanted to be. It was just that I probably would not be able to watch him much longer. I looked greedily at his face, as if I wanted to carve his appearance into my mind bit by bit. After this, I would never see him again. But Ethan frowned under my gaze, and a trace of disgust flashed in his eyes. Have you looked enough? I withdrew my gaze, lowered my head, and gently stroked my high, swollen abdomen. Under my palm was cold and heavy ascites. But in my mind, another tiny life that had disappeared long ago surfaced. That child only stayed in my body for a short few dozen days. During that time, I secretly downloaded countless pregnancy apps. Every day, I would look up which fruits I could eat, what things I had to avoid, when the baby would start moving, and how to sleep in late pregnancy. Later, the child was gone. But I never forgot that knowledge. I gave a soft smile. Okay, I will carefully teach you what to pay attention to during pregnancy. Susie's eyes immediately lit up. She pulled Ethan to sit by the bed like a student listening carefully in class. I suppressed the bitterness surging in my throat and said softly, do not overwork yourself in the first trimester, and do not stay up late. Keep taking folic acid, keep your diet as light as possible, and eat less cold and raw food. I paused, and my voice grew softer and softer. A pregnant woman's emotions are very important. Her family should spend more time with her. Do not let her overthink alone. I looked at Susie's slightly swollen belly, and my nose stung. After the baby is born, their stomach is very fragile for the first 3 months. Remember to burp the baby after feeding, do not make the bathwater too hot, and do not cover the baby with too many blankets at night. These were things I had once imagined I would tell Ethan myself one day. I would tell him how we should take care of our baby in the future. But now, the person beside him was no longer me. A scoff suddenly sounded in the hospital room. Ethan leaned back in his chair and looked at me with a faint, mocking smile. You sure know a lot. Looks like you have given birth plenty of times these past few years. The air instantly froze. My fingertips tightened little by little. He said coldly, since you have so much experience, let me ask you one more question. He spoke slowly, his tone full of ridicule. During pregnancy, can a couple still have sex? My face instantly turned white. I bit my lip hard, my nails almost digging into my palm, and I was so humiliated that I could not say a word. Ethan looked at my pale face, and there was not the slightest warmth in his eyes. What? Should you not have the most say in this kind of question? Or did none of your men teach you? Every word was like a dull knife cutting my heart open inch by inch. I lowered my head, tears spinning in my eyes, but they never fell. After waiting a long time without getting my answer, Ethan gave a cold laugh. Forget it. Asking you only dirties Susie's ears. After he finished speaking, he reached out and pulled Susie into his arms, the movement natural and gentle. Let's go. The air here is bad. Do not let it affect the baby. Susie looked back at me once, hesitant to speak, but in the end, she still followed him out of the hospital room. The hospital room door slowly closed. I stared blankly at their backs as they left hand in hand. His hand was carefully protecting another girl's belly. That place had once belonged to me. Tears rolled down without warning. Although I had known for a long time that this day would come. But when I saw it with my own eyes and heard it with my own ears, the man who once said he would stay with me for the rest of my life had already given all his tenderness to another girl. My heart still hurt so bitterly that I could barely breathe. Ethan messaged me and asked me to help Susie choose a postpartum care center. The agreed time was 9 in the morning. For this meeting, I woke up at 6 in the morning. Zoe washed my hair for me, carefully helped me put on my wig, and picked out the loosest cream-colored hoodie to cover my swollen belly. She looked at my bloodless, pale face, and her nose stung. Lily, why don't you just not go? Your body right now. I smiled and interrupted her. I will go. Did we not agree that I would go with them to look at postpartum care centers? I looked up a lot of information. I can help at least a little. Zoe lowered her head and her eyes slowly reddened. At 8:30, she pushed my wheelchair and brought me downstairs to the hospital entrance. But I waited until 1 in the afternoon. Ethan never appeared. I called him 3 times. Every time, he hung up without mercy. Zoe was so angry her eyes turned red. What does he mean? He is clearly the one who asked you to meet. Lily, let's go back. Do not wait anymore. But I gently shook my head. No. I looked at the people coming and going at the hospital entrance and said softly, going out this time has already used up so much of my strength. After this is over, I might never be able to leave again. Zoe abruptly turned her head and secretly wiped away her tears. At 2 in the afternoon, my phone finally vibrated. On the other end of the call was Ethan's cold voice. Come down. We are here. Zoe clenched her fists, furious enough to curse. But I gently held her hand. Zoe, this is the last time. She looked at me, and in the end, she still forced all her anger down. The car door opened. As soon as I sat in the back seat, Susie turned around and smiled at me. Sorry, Ms. Bennett. Ethan kept me up too late last night. She blushed and laughed softly. I could not get out of bed this morning, so I made you wait so long. My fingers curled slightly. Before I could say anything, Ethan, who was putting the wheelchair away from the driver's seat, glanced at me lightly through the rearview mirror. Why explain that to her? If she is willing to wait, let her wait. The car suddenly fell silent. Zoe's face turned ashen, and just as she was about to speak, I gently pulled her back. I only waved at her through the car window as she stood by the road. Go back. Zoe gritted her teeth as tears kept falling. Call me when it is over. I nodded. The car slowly drove away from the hospital. Along the way, Ethan drove very fast. He pressed hard on the gas, and he did not slow down when turning. My body was thrown against the car door again and again, and my large belly filled with ascites throbbed dully with pain while my stomach churned violently. I gripped the seat belt tightly, and a layer of cold sweat soon formed on my forehead. But suddenly, many years ago appeared before my eyes. Back then, Ethan had just gotten his driver's license. He was so excited that for an entire week, he insisted on taking me out for drives. Knowing I got carsick, he would prepare orange candy and motion sickness patches in advance. Every time he started or braked, he did it so gently that I could barely feel it. He said, "My Lily is delicate. It hurts me even if she bumps into something." For many years after that, I would get carsick on buses, and I would get carsick in taxis. Only when I sat in his car did I never feel uncomfortable. Screech. A sharp braking sound suddenly rang out. My body slammed hard against the seat back. A violent cramping pain shot through my abdomen. I covered my mouth and could not help letting out a suppressed groan. Ethan looked at me through the rearview mirror, and suddenly scoffed. What? You do not still think I will take care of you like before, do you? Try not to drive fast, not brake suddenly and not make you carsick? I slowly closed my eyes and swallowed the bloody sweetness in my throat bit by bit. After a long while, I finally spoke softly. No. The person you should take care of now is Susie. She is pregnant with your baby. She cannot be frightened. A cold curve lifted at the corner of Ethan's lips. At least you know your place. After he said that, he once again pressed heavily on the gas. The car suddenly shot forward. My body slammed back against the seat again. My back hurt as if it were splitting open. But I slowly smiled. This was good. He was still willing to hate me. Hate was better than forgetting. At least while I was still alive. In Ethan's heart, I was not a complete stranger yet. After that, I did not feel sick for long before we arrived at our destination. When I got out of the car, Ethan carried me. When I fell into his arms again for one instant, I almost could not hold back my tears. But fortunately, after Ethan quickly carried me out of the car, he immediately placed me in the wheelchair. He even seemed disgusted by me, and after putting me in the wheelchair, he urgently asked Susie for 2 wet wipes and wiped his hands desperately. Susie also stood to the side and awkwardly explained to me, "Sorry, Lily. Ethan is a clean freak. Other than me, if any woman touches him, he feels disgusted." Looking at Ethan's actions, I lowered my head and pressed my lips together, pretending I had not seen what he did and had not heard Susie's words. After that, I let Ethan and Susie hold hands while pushing me into a postpartum care center. As soon as we walked into the lobby, a staff member greeted us warmly. "Mr. Reed, Mrs. Reed, welcome. Thank you for coming to visit. This way, please. We will first show you the recovery area for mothers, then the newborn care room." Ethan nodded. Susie happily held his arm, and I silently followed behind them. Along the way, the staff member kept explaining, "We offer 24-hour one-on-one care here. Newborn baths, baby massage, jaundice monitoring, and postpartum nutrition meals will all be handled by a professional team. After the baby is born, the father can also learn how to take care of the child with us." Listening to the staff member's words, my heart felt bitter, because I had looked all of this up back then. I had even bought a thick copy of a newborn care handbook. But later, that book was never opened again. The staff member led us into a model room. Inside the room were a crib, tiny clothes, and all kinds of bottles and toys. The staff member smiled and said, "Mrs. Reed, you can experience the environment for your postpartum recovery in advance." Susie nodded with a face full of happiness. Ethan suddenly said, "I am going to the restroom." After that, Ethan did not look at me again, nor did he look at Susie. He turned and walked toward the restroom. And as I looked at his back, waves of bitterness rose in my heart again. So, had I messed up again? Guilt spread through my chest. But Susie, who was sitting across from me, directly picked up a cup of hot water and suddenly splashed it onto my face. "You fake little bitch, do you think I am stupid? You keep pretending to be pitiful again and again to seduce my fiancé." The cheek Susie splashed with hot water began to ache, but I only clenched my palm tightly. Then I said guiltily, "I am sorry. If I made you misunderstand, I apologize." Susie only stood up with a mocking laugh. After that, she walked over and slapped me across the face. Do you think that by acting like you are about to die, you can make Ethan change his mind? I am telling you, Ethan will be mine for the rest of his life. Do not think you can take him away just because you were his first love. My cheek hurt and went numb from Susie's slap. I could endure her splashing water on me. After all, I was shamelessly clinging to Ethan's tenderness. But she could not hit me. So without thinking, I pushed her away. Susie, if you dare lay a hand on me again, I will call the police. But the moment my words fell, for some reason, Susie suddenly fell to the ground. Then she suddenly began to wail. Ow, my stomach. Help. Someone is attacking a pregnant woman. I looked at her lying on the ground and stared at my own hands in disbelief. After all, I had been sick for 6 years. Even putting on clothes exhausted me. Sometimes I could not even hold a cup of water steadily. I did not have the strength to push Susie down at all. When I pushed her just now, it had only been to stop her from hitting me again. But who would have known? Susie suddenly lay down on the ground. And just when I was at a loss, Ethan suddenly appeared in the lobby. When he saw Susie lying on the ground, he rushed toward Susie anxiously. Susie, how are you? Susie immediately started crying. Crying, she gripped Ethan's collar tightly. Ethan, save me. Save the baby in my belly. She wants to kill me. As soon as you left, she started insulting me, saying you were trash she did not want, and that whenever she wanted you back, you would shamelessly crawl back to beg her. I could not hold it in. So I splashed a cup of water on her. But who knew she would get even angrier and start cursing at me, calling me a vicious fake bitch, and saying I am a slut who only picks up men she threw away. I could not hold back, so I slapped her. After that, she angrily pushed me away. You know I am pregnant and my health is not good. I cannot take even the slightest bump. Listening to Susie's words, I froze in shock where I was. My lips and teeth trembled several times before I could speak. Ethan, listen to me. It was not like that. I really did not. But who knew? Ethan erupted in a furious roar. Lily, how can you be so vicious? As he spoke, he walked over and angrily kicked me hard. My head slammed heavily into the corner of the display cabinet. Blood instantly surged out. My head buzzed. Even my body was trembling. But Ethan did not look at me once. He only anxiously picked Susie up. As Susie cried, he anxiously kissed the corner of her lips. It is okay, baby. It is okay. Do not cry. I will take you to the hospital right now. After that, he did not look at me again. He turned and carried Susie toward the door. And I looked at Susie's provocative smile. And Ethan's back. Suddenly, I laughed. I laughed until tears flowed out. This also made me think of the year we were 18. A man on the bus had harassed me and grabbed my butt. Back then, Ethan was still an impulsive young guy. Furious, he grabbed that man, who was a head taller than him and much stronger than him. Like an enraged beast. He punched that man's face again and again. You worthless piece of trash. How dare you touch my woman? I am going to beat you to death. At that time, all the passengers on the bus were frightened. Only I cried as I held Ethan's arm tightly. I begged him. I cried and told him to stop, and only then did Ethan stop. Before, Ethan's woman was me, so he would protect me with his life. Now, the person in Ethan's heart had become another woman, so he would protect her with his life. Even if the person he hit was me. My heart hurt so badly it trembled. The staff members around the postpartum care center gradually gathered around too. After that, the police came. The moment I saw the police appear, my strength suddenly drained away. I gripped the officer's hand tightly and said, "Tell my family not to pursue this. This was all my own choice." My heart felt bitter, but for some reason, I had no regrets anymore. After all, I had fought cancer for 7 years, and I had waited for 7 years. My greatest dream was just to see Ethan once. I saw him, so my dream came true. I could die smiling now. The copper taste of blood was the only warm thing left in my mouth. I lay on the cold tiles of the postpartum care center lobby, my head resting in a sticky, spreading pool of crimson. The high-pitched ringing in my ears drowned out the panicked murmurs of the staff and the distant, fading sound of Ethan's hurried footsteps. He was gone, carrying Susie in his arms, his body a shield to protect her from the vicious monster he believed I was. "Miss. Oh my God, miss, please stay awake." A young female receptionist knelt beside me, her hands trembling as she pressed a clean linen towel against the gash on my temple. The white fabric turned red, instantly soaking through her fingers. I wanted to tell her not to ruin her uniform. I wanted to tell her that it didn't matter. My body was already a hollowed-out shell, a temporary vessel, holding a dozen pounds of malignant fluid, and a heart that had beaten past its expiration date. A little more blood on the floor was just a drop in the ocean of what had already been taken from me. When the police arrived, accompanied by the high-pitched wail of an ambulance, I felt a strange, detached sense of peace. A young officer with kind, worried eyes knelt in the dirt beside my wheelchair. The staff had lifted me back into it, though I could barely keep my spine straight. He held a small notepad, his pen hovering over the paper. Ma'am, the witnesses said a man kicked you. We have his license plate from the security cameras outside. Do you want to press charges? I looked at the officer's clean, unblemished face. He was young. He probably had a mother who loved him, a life that made sense. He didn't understand that the man who kicked me was the same man who once spent his last $300 to buy me an electric heating pad when my ovaries first started to ache in the winter of our freshman year. No, I whispered, my voice rattling in my throat. I had to use every ounce of my remaining strength just to push the sound past my lips. No charges. Please. It was an accident. I fell. Ma'am, the camera in the lobby clearly shows. I don't want to press charges, I repeated, my fingers weakly tightening around his sleeve. My grip was so frail, my hand nothing but yellowed skin stretched over thin, brittle bones. Tell my family not to pursue it. It was my choice. All of it. The officer looked at me, a deep, sorrowful confusion crossing his face. He didn't understand, but he saw the plastic hospital band around my wrist, the extreme emaciation of my collarbones, and the terrible, unnatural swelling of my belly beneath the loose cream-colored hoodie. He knew without me saying it that he was looking at a dying woman. All right, he said softly, his voice dropping to a respectful whisper. All right, Mum. By the time the ambulance brought me back to the municipal hospital, the sun had already slipped below the horizon, leaving the sky a bruised, dark purple. Zoe was waiting for me at the entrance of the oncology ward. The moment she saw the white bandage wrapped around my head, stained with a dark circle of dried blood, she let out a choked, animalistic cry. She rushed forward, pushing the paramedics aside, her hands hovering over me in absolute horror. Lily, what did they do to you? What did that bastard do? Zoe, don't. I mumbled, my eyelids feeling like lead weights. I'm tired. I just want to sleep. Dr. Evans, my attending physician, walked out of the treatment room, his face dark with an anger I had never seen on him in the 4 years he had been managing my palliative care. He took one look at my head wound, checked my pulse, and immediately ordered a blood transfusion and a cranial CT scan. Her platelets are extremely low because of the advanced bone marrow suppression, Dr. Evans said to Zoe, his voice sharp with suppressed fury. Any head trauma is incredibly dangerous. Who did this to her? Ethan Reed, Zoe spat, the name tearing from her throat like a curse. He and his pregnant fiancée. They dragged her out to look at postpartum care centers. And then they did this to her. Dr. Evans closed his eyes, his chest rising and falling in a long, heavy sigh. He looked down at me as I lay on the gurney, my face gray, my lips cracked and dry. Miss Bennett, he said softly, leaning over me. Why do you keep protecting them? You have less than 2 weeks left. Why are you letting them stomp on what little dignity you have left? I gave him a faint, bloodless smile. Because he's the only home I ever had, Dr. Evans, I whispered. Even if the house is burned down, the ashes are still warm. At the Central Private Hospital, 3 miles away, the VIP obstetrics wing was quiet and luxurious. Ethan sat on the plush leather sofa in the private waiting room, his fingers tightly clasped between his knees. His tailored suit jacket was slightly rumpled, and his tie was askew. Beside him, Susie lay on the adjustable medical bed, a nurse gently applying a cold compress to her cheek where the red mark of Lily's slap had already faded into a faint pink. The baby is perfectly fine, Mr. Reed, the doctor said, sliding the ultrasound probe off Susie's belly and wiping the gel away with a warm towel. The fetal heart rate is stable, and there are no signs of uterine contractions or placental abruption. It was just a minor shock. Ethan let out a long, slow breath, but the heavy knot in his chest didn't loosen. He looked at Susie, who was sniffle crying into her pillow, her hand resting over her 3-month-old bump. She looked so small, so delicate. He had spent the last 3 years building a life where he could protect her from the harshness of the world, a promise he had made to himself after he failed to protect his own heart 6 years ago. But in his mind, another image kept flickering, an intrusive, persistent shadow that he couldn't shake. He saw Lily. He saw her falling backward, her head striking the sharp wooden edge of the display cabinet with a dull, hollow crack. He remembered the sound of her body hitting the floor, so light, almost weightless, like a bundle of dry twigs. And then there was the blood. It had come out so fast, bright red against the cream-colored hoodie she wore. He remembered the way she looked at him as he carried Susie away. Her eyes weren't filled with anger or hatred, or even the desperate vanity he had expected from a woman who had abandoned him for money. They were filled with a vast, silent emptiness, as if she had already left the world long before his foot ever made contact with her side. Ethan, does it still hurt? Susie's soft, trembling voice broke through his thoughts. She reached out, her fingers catching the edge of his sleeve. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have gotten so emotional. But when she started saying those things about you, saying you were just a dog she threw away, I couldn't help it. Ethan forced a smile, leaning over to kiss her forehead. It's fine, Susie. You did nothing wrong. You were protecting our family. But she pushed me so hard, Susie whispered, her eyes darting away for a split second. I really thought I was going to lose the baby. Before Ethan could reply, his personal phone vibrated in his pocket. He pulled it out, expecting a call from his secretary about the upcoming board meeting. Instead, the caller ID showed the name of the manager of the postpartum care center they had visited that afternoon. Ethan's brow furrowed. He stood up, stepping out into the quiet, carpeted hallway of the VIP wing before pressing answer. Mr. Reed. The manager's voice came through the receiver, sounding extremely tense, almost breathless. I apologize for disturbing you at the hospital, but the police were just here. They were investigating the incident with the lady in the wheelchair. Ethan's jaw tightened. She called the police? Of course she did. She's probably looking for a payout. Tell them I'll have my legal team handle it. She assaulted my pregnant fiancée first. There was a long, suffocating pause on the other end of the line. Mr. Reed. That's actually why I'm calling, the manager said, her voice dropping to a nervous whisper. The police insisted on reviewing the high-definition security footage from the model room lobby. We had to show it to them. And I think you should see it too. I've sent a copy of the clip to your personal email. What are you talking about? Ethan asked, a cold trickle of unease sliding down his spine. I know what happened. Susie told me. Just, please watch the video, Mr. Reed, the manager said quietly. For your own sake, before the police contact you directly. The line went dead. Ethan stood in the silent, sterile hallway, the fluorescent lights reflecting off the polished linoleum floor. His fingers trembled slightly as he opened his email app. A single file was waiting for him, titled lobby_cam_04_1430.mp4. He pressed play. The video was clear, shot from a high angle near the ceiling. It showed Susie and Lily sitting across from each other in the model room lobby. Ethan watched himself stand up and walk toward the restroom, leaving them alone. Almost immediately, Susie's demeanor changed. The sweet, gentle smile vanished from her face. She picked up her cup of hot water and, without a second of hesitation, threw it directly into Lily's face. Ethan's breath caught in his throat. He watched Lily flinch, her body shaking as the hot water soaked her face and hair. She didn't shout. She didn't stand up. She only clenched her thin hands in her lap, her head bowed in a posture of complete, devastating submission. But Susie wasn't finished. She stood up, walked over to Lily's wheelchair, and delivered a brutal, stinging slap across Lily's cheek. The force of the blow was so strong that Lily's wig slipped slightly, revealing the pale, nearly bald scalp beneath. Ethan's hand shook so hard he almost dropped the phone. On the screen, Lily raised her hands weakly, not to strike, but merely to shield her face from another blow. Her movements were slow, awkward, like those of a severely disabled person. When Susie reached out to grab her hair again, Lily gave a feeble push to keep her away. And then Susie fell. She didn't stumble. She didn't lose her balance. She paused for a fraction of a second, looked toward the hallway where Ethan was expected to return, and then threw herself backward onto the carpet, immediately kicking her legs and screaming. A second later, Ethan appeared on the screen. He rushed forward, his face twisted in fury, and delivered that heavy, crushing kick to Lily's side, sending her wheelchair spinning and her head crashing into the display cabinet. The video ended with a shot of Lily lying in her own blood, her hand weakly reaching toward her swollen abdomen, while Ethan carried Susie away without a single backward glance. The phone slipped from Ethan's hand, clattering against the wall before landing on the carpet. His chest rose and fell in rapid, shallow gasps. The air in his lungs felt like glass, tearing his throat with every breath. The entire world, the 6 years of hatred, the success, the pride, the beautiful fiancée, the perfect future, seemed to crack open, revealing a dark, yawning abyss of horror. He had kicked her. He had kicked Lily, who was so weak she couldn't even stand, who had sat in that chair and let his fiancée pour boiling water on her face without a single word of complaint. Ethan. The door to the VIP room opened, and Susie stepped out, her face still carrying that soft, innocent look. The nurse said the discharge papers are ready. Can we go home now? Ethan turned slowly to look at her. For the first time in 3 years, he didn't see the girl he wanted to protect. He saw a stranger, a monster with a beautiful face who had used his own hands to destroy the only person he had ever truly loved. Ethan. Susie's smile faltered, her eyes dropping to the phone on the floor. What's wrong? Why are you looking at me like that? Ethan didn't answer. He bent down, picked up his phone and walked past her. Toward the exit, his footsteps heavy and hollow in the quiet hospital. The drive to his mother's apartment was a blur of speed and red lights. Ethan didn't remember parking his car. He didn't remember climbing the stairs. When his mother, Beatrice, opened the door, she was wearing a soft knit cardigan, a gentle, maternal smile on her face. But the moment she saw Ethan's expression, his eyes bloodshot, his face pale as paper, his hands shaking, her smile vanished, replaced by a sudden, guilty panic. Ethan? What's wrong? Did something happen to Susie? Ethan stepped into the apartment, closing the door behind him with a quiet, final click. He didn't take off his shoes. He stood in the center of the living room, his gaze fixed on his mother's face. You went to see Lily, he said, his voice flat, empty of any warmth. Beatrice's breath hitched. She looked away, her hands nervously smoothing the fabric of her cardigan. Ethan, I don't know what you're talking about. Don't lie to me, mother, Ethan said, his voice dropping into a dangerous, shaking register. The hospital parking log has your car registered on Wednesday morning. The oncology ward's visitor sheet has your signature. You went to see her. Beatrice fell silent, her shoulders slumping as she realized she couldn't escape. She walked over to the sofa and sat down, her eyes filling with tears. I did it for you, Ethan, she whispered, her voice cracking. I did it for your future. You've finally built a stable career. You've met Susie, who is willing to stay with you and give you a family. If Lily came back, if she told you about her illness, I knew you would abandon everything to save her. Ethan's heart stopped. Her illness, he whispered, the words tasting like ash in his mouth. What? Illness? Beatrice looked up, her face wet with tears. She has late-stage ovarian cancer, Ethan. The doctor said she only has a few weeks left. The fluid in her stomach, the swelling you saw, it's not a child. It's ascites. She's dying. The room seemed to tilt. Ethan stumbled backward, his hand catching the edge of the entryway table to keep from falling. It's not a child. Which pregnancy is this for you now? What, he knocked you up but would not even marry you? His own words, the cruel, mocking slurs he had hurled at her in the hospital and the car, echoed in his head, each one a sharp, poisoned arrow tearing through his skull. And 6 years ago? Ethan gasped, his throat so tight he could barely get the words out. The car, the ambulance, the other man? Beatrice buried her face in her hands, her shoulders shaking with deep, guilty sobs. She was diagnosed 6 years ago, Ethan. On the very day you were running around, begging for investors for your startup. She didn't want to be a burden to you. She knew you couldn't afford her treatment, and she was afraid you would sell your company and ruin your future to save her. So she lied. Ethan whispered, a single, hot tear rolling down his cheek, followed by another, and another, until his vision was completely blurred. She lied to keep me from destroying my life for her. Yes, Beatrice sobbed. She told you she fell in love with someone else. She told you she was pregnant with another man's child. But it was all a lie. She's been alone all these years, Ethan. She's been in that hospital going through surgeries, chemotherapy, relapse after relapse, all by herself. And you knew, Ethan said, his voice dropping to a whisper that was colder than the winter wind. You knew all of it. And you still asked her to stay away. I was afraid. Beatrice screamed, looking up with a face full of desperation. I'm your mother, Ethan. I watched you suffer for 2 years after she left. I couldn't let her drag you down into the grave with her. Ethan looked at his mother, the woman who had raised him, who had claimed to love him. He felt a deep, overwhelming sense of disgust, not just for her, but for himself. For his success, his money, his beautiful suit, and his stupid, empty pride. He turned around and walked out of the apartment, ignoring his mother's desperate cries behind him. He had to find her. He had to find his Lily, before the cold wind of the world carried her away. Forever. The rain began to fall as Ethan drove toward the municipal hospital. It was a heavy, cold southern downpour, the drops drumming furiously against his windshield, blurring the city lights into long, smeared streaks of red and yellow. He pressed hard on the gas, his hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles turned white. Lily, please, just stay alive. Just let me see you one more time. He abandoned his car at the hospital entrance, leaving the door open as he rushed through the automatic doors and into the quiet, sterile warmth of the lobby. He ran up the stairs to the oncology ward, his leather shoes squeaking loudly against the polished linoleum. He didn't care about the nurses' shouts or the security guards who looked at his rumpled suit and wild eyes with suspicion. When he reached the door of room 402, he was blocked. Zoe stood in the doorway, her arms crossed over her chest, her eyes red and swollen from crying. Behind her, Dr. Evans stood by the bed, adjusting an line connected to a pale, motionless figure under the blankets. Get out, Zoe said, her voice dropping into a low, vicious hiss. You have no right to be here. Zoe, please, Ethan gasped, his chest heaving, his face wet with rain and tears. I know everything. I know about the cancer. I know about 6 years ago. Just let me see her. You know? Zoe let out a harsh, bitter laugh that was closer to a sob. You know now? After you kicked her? After you let your trash fiancé slap her and pour boiling water on her? She stepped forward, her hand flying out, delivering a stinging slap across Ethan's cheek. Ethan didn't flinch. He didn't move. He stood there, accepting the blow, his eyes fixed on the pale, quiet face on the bed behind her. She's in a hepatic coma, Ethan, Zoe said, her tears finally spilling over. The trauma from your kick. It caused acute internal bleeding in her abdominal cavity. Because of her low platelets, we couldn't stop the bleeding in time. Her liver is failing. Her kidneys are failing. She grabbed his lapels, shaking him with all her remaining strength. She has less than 48 hours left, Ethan. And the last thing she experienced in this world from the man she loved was a boot to her ribs. Are you happy now? Is your revenge complete? Ethan's knees gave out. He collapsed onto his knees on the cold hospital floor, his head resting against the doorframe, his shoulders shaking with deep, silent sobs. I didn't know. He whispered, his voice cracking. Didn't know. That's your excuse? Dr. Evan's cold, professional voice came from behind Zoe. He walked out of the room, closing the door slightly to protect Lily's peace. You didn't know because you didn't want to know, Mr. Reed. You wanted to feed your own ego, your own anger. You wanted to believe she was a gold digger, because it was easier than facing the truth. He looked down at Ethan, his eyes filled with a deep, professional disgust. 6 years ago, she had a chance of survival. But she refused to use your startup funds for her treatment. She lived in a public ward, ate cheap food, and worked part-time during her remissions just to pay her medical bills. She did all of that so you could become the rising business star you are today. Dr. Evans sighed, his tone softening slightly but losing none of its coldness. And now, her greatest dream was just to see you once. She saw you. And this is how you repaid her. Ethan buried his face in his hands, his tears soaking into the expensive fabric of his trousers. Every word was a nail in his coffin. He had spent 6 years hating her, building his empire on the foundation of her sacrifice, only to return and destroy the last of her days with his own hands. Can I just sit with her? Ethan begged, looking up through his tears. I won't speak. I won't wake her. Just, please let me hold her hand. Zoe looked at him, her face filled with a mixture of hatred and a strange, tired pity. If she wakes up, Zoe said quietly, and she wants to see you, I'll let you in. But if she doesn't, you stay out here. You stay out here in the cold and watch her leave, just like she watched you leave 6 years ago. At 3 in the morning, the hospital was silent. The rain had stopped, leaving only the quiet, rhythmic dripping of water from the eaves outside the window. The only sound in room 402 was the slow, weak beep of the heart monitor and the quiet hiss of the oxygen machine. Lily's eyelids fluttered. She slowly opened her eyes, her vision blurry and dark. The pain in her abdomen was gone, replaced by a strange, weightless numbness. She knew what this meant. She had seen enough patients in the oncology ward reach this stage. It was the body's final mercy before the end. Lily. Zoe was sitting by her bedside, her hand tightly holding hers. Her face was pale, her eyes red. Zoe, Lily whispered, her voice so faint it was barely a breath. Is he out there? Zoe's lips trembled. She looked toward the small glass window in the door, where a dark, disheveled figure had been sitting on the floor for the last 10 hours, his head resting against his knees. Yes, Zoe said quietly. He's been out there all night, Lily. He knows. He knows everything. A small, peaceful smile appeared on Lily's lips. Let him in, Zoe. I don't want him to be cold. Zoe closed her eyes, a single tear rolling down her cheek. She stood up, walked to the door and opened it. Ethan scrambled to his feet instantly. He looked terrible, his suit jacket was gone, his shirt was wrinkled and stained with dirt from the floor, and his eyes were hollow, filled with a deep, silent terror. She's awake, Zoe said quietly. She wants to see you. Ethan stepped into the room, his footsteps slow and hesitant, as if he were afraid the floor would collapse beneath him. He walked over to the bed and fell to his knees beside it, his hands trembling as he reached out to touch the white blanket. Lily, he gasped, his voice cracking as the tears began to fall again. Lily, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I didn't know. Lily slowly turned her head to look at him. She reached out with her hand, the Skin so thin, the fingers so cold, and gently rested it against his cheek, her thumb wiping away a tear. I know, Ethan, she whispered, her voice soft and sweet, exactly the way it had been when they were 18 and sitting on the steps of their old apartment. No. Don't cry. It's not your fault. How can you say that? Ethan sobbed, pressing his face into her palm, his shoulders shaking. I kicked you, Lily. I let them hurt you. I said those terrible things. I hated you for 6 years while you were suffering here, alone. I wanted you to hate me, Lily said quietly, her eyes bright with a final, lingering light. If you hated me, you would go abroad. You would focus on your startup. You would become the successful man you are today. And you did. Ethan, I saw you on the news. You look so handsome in your suit. I don't care about the company, Ethan screamed, his voice muffled against her hand. I don't care about the money. I would give all of it away, every single penny, just to go back to that old apartment. Just to have $3,000 in my bank account and you in my arms. Silly boy, Lily smiled, her breathing growing slower, more shallow. The past is the past. You have Susie now. You have a baby. You have a family. No, Ethan said quickly, looking up, his eyes wild. The baby is yours, Lily. Zoe told me. The child we lost 6 years ago. It was mine. And the baby Susie is carrying, it's not mine. I ran a test, Lily. I found out yesterday. She lied to me, just like she lied about everything else. I'm going to end the engagement. I'm going to stay here with you. Lily looked at him, a deep, sorrowful tender in her eyes. No, Ethan, she said, her voice dropping to a whisper. Don't do that. Don't live in the past. Live your life. Be happy. For me. She looked out the window, where the first light of dawn was beginning to paint the sky a soft, pale pink. Do you remember the year we were 18? She asked softly, her eyes looking far away. We took the bus to the beach. We didn't have enough money for a hotel, so we slept on the sand under my old coat. I remember, Ethan sobbed, his hand tightly holding hers, feeling the warmth slowly leaving her fingers. I remember, Lily. You were cold, so I held you all night. The sand was so warm, Lily whispered, her eyelids slowly dropping. And the stars were so bright. I was so happy then, Ethan. Lily, please stay. Don't leave me here alone, Ethan begged, his voice rising in panic as the heart monitor's beeps began to slow down, the intervals growing longer, more silent. I'm not leaving, Ethan, Lily whispered, her breath escaping in one last long, peaceful sigh. I'm just going to sleep first. Hold my hand, okay? I'm holding it, Lily. I'm holding it, Ethan cried, pressing his forehead against her cold hand. But the hand was silent. The heart monitor let out a single, long, continuous beep, filling the quiet hospital room with a flat, final sound. Ethan didn't scream. He didn't move. He lay there, his face pressed into her palm, his tears soaking the dry, pale skin, holding on to the only woman who had ever loved him enough to die in silence so he could live in the light. 3 months later. The winter in the city was cold and dry, the gray streets lined with bare, skeletal trees that shivered in the wind. The bankruptcy proceedings for Susie's family's company were finalized. Susie had been cast out of the Reed family, her lies exposed to the public, leaving her to face the consequences of her actions alone. Ethan's mother, Beatrice, lived in a small, quiet apartment in the suburbs, her son refusing to take her calls, her days spent in the suffocating silence of her own regret. Ethan sat in the driver's seat of his car, parked outside the old apartment building where they had lived 6 years ago. The building was old and rundown, the brickwork cracked and stained with soot. But to him, it was the only place in the world that held any real meaning. He reached into his glove compartment and pulled out a small, worn-out leather box. Inside were the 2 silver couple rings he had once smashed onto the airport floor. He had spent weeks searching the local shops until he found a jeweler willing to restore them, welding the broken metal back together, leaving a thin, visible seam where the fracture had been. He slipped his ring onto his finger. The metal was cold against his skin, but it felt solid, real. He looked through the rearview mirror. His face was thin, his eyes hollow and dark. He didn't wear his tailored suits anymore. He wore a simple, faded cream-colored hoodie, the same color Lily had worn on her final day. He turned on the car radio. A soft, melancholic melody filled the quiet car, the lyrics singing of a love that had been lost in the rain, of a spring that would never return. Ethan closed his eyes, his hand resting on the passenger seat beside him where a small, fresh bouquet of white lilies lay on the leather. I'm sorry, Lily, he whispered to the empty car, a single, silent tear rolling down his cheek. I'm sorry I was so late. The wind blew outside, scattering the dry, brown leaves across the concrete, leaving the city in the grip of a long, cold winter that would never truly end.